Heard a couple people mention John Kabat-Zinn. This is a picture. How many are familiar with John Kabat-Zinn? Either read a book or saw a video or maybe went to a retreat or something. Okay, so a lot of you. By the way, anybody catch the, I can't remember if it was 60 Minutes or CBS This Morning, one of those where Anderson Cooper goes on a retreat with John Kabat-Zinn? That's a good one to Google and watch the video on that, you know. In the beginning, Anderson Cooper saying something like, yeah, I heard of mindfulness, and it kind of sounded like a cult or something, but I thought I'd go check it out. So he goes to this week-long retreat with John Kabat-Zinn, and they show Anderson nervously putting his cell phone in a basket because you're not supposed to be checking your phone, you know, during the meditations and such. And then later on, they show Anderson hooked up to this EEG monitor, and it shows him, you know, changing his own brain waves at will. You know, by the end, he says, "I drank the Kool-Aid." Which is a terrible expression. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, it's poison. But in this case, I guess that means he practices that himself. I've noticed he is pretty attentive when he gives interviews. But anyway, John Kabat-Zinn is one of the original founders of mindfulness-based stress reduction. One of the things this program is based on out of UMass back in the 70s. And what really impressed me when I first saw this program is how he took these things that, you know, take a lot of people, myself included, decades to start to figure out, to compress this into an 8-week program where we can systematically take people without any prior experience and, you know, have them start to understand better how their own minds work. And because he made it as a structured program, now we could reproduce it or replicate it, which means we can do scientific research. So now there's been decades and decades of research on this. And we can talk about some of that if you're interested in that. Anyway, this is his definition of mindfulness. So what I'm going to do is break this down line by line by line and start to get at what this is about. Now, it's really best experienced. In fact, maybe I should mention now, today is going to be kind of different from how the other sessions are going to go if you're coming to the full 8 weeks. I'm going to be very intellectual today. I mean, we're going to do an exercise coming up in just a moment. But what I find is a lot of people, you know, especially a lot of you, I've never met you before, so that's a big commitment, you know, 8 weeks of your life and however much money, right? So this is kind of giving you the foundational understanding, sort of the science behind it. So I'm going to be really talkative today. In the actual groups, as we'll talk about, there'll be more of an experiential component, as well as discussions in there too. Anyway, here's the definition. The top line is the awareness that emerges. So this is getting at that waking up quality that I talked about earlier. Because again, it's so easy to get caught up in sort of this automatic pilot mode, right? Sometimes it's a literal automatic pilot. You ever been driving your car and the next thing you know you're home, but you don't really remember the drive or the process? It's like you were off in your head somewhere, but you know, you still managed to make it home. I think it was James Joyce that said about one of his characters, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. You know, it's like a lot of us are just kind of out here somewhere. We're not actually like in our lives because we can really get caught up and carried away in this mental realm, right? It's not always a bad thing. I mean, it can be a very creative process to think, etc. But when it tends to be the same old stuff playing out all the time, you can feel like your life's just passing you by because you're never in the actual moments. You're not experiencing your life as it's happening, right? Where it can be helpful too is for us to start to recognize automatic pilot modes of thinking, automatic pilot modes of emotionally reacting, and automatic pilot modes of behavior that maybe in another time, in another place, could have been helpful, but now we do it automatically and it sort of gets us in trouble. For example, I was dating a woman once who we took our kids, actually it was to Hocking Hills, so you know, it's a couple-hour drive or however long it was, and you know, it was a long day playing with the kids or whatever. So I'm driving home, and I was really quiet because I was just so exhausted, and you know, I tend to get quiet when I'm tired. So she said, is everything okay? I'm like, oh, yeah, everything's great. I'm just really wiped out because, you know, all the stuff we did and blah, blah, blah. And then I got quiet again, and a couple minutes later, she said, are you sure everything's okay? Oh, yeah, everything's fine. Now, I didn't know at the time that would have been helpful to know is that her father used to give her the silent treatment. Now, I'd heard of the silent treatment, of course, but I never realized till then what a real thing this was for some people, because I didn't experience this myself, right? She said she could come home from school, not even know she did anything wrong. Hi, Dad. You know, he like wouldn't make eye contact, he wouldn't say hi, and apparently this could go on for days sometimes. So naturally this was a little traumatic. So guess what? After an hour of every couple of minutes, are you okay? Are you irritated? Are you mad? I'm like, I'm not mad, right? so this weird pattern was going on, right? Where, but the good news was, once we figured out what was happening, it only took one of us to have this emerging awareness to break out of the pattern, right? I mean, how ridiculous for me to get mad that she thinks I'm mad. And eventually she figured out, oh, he's just quiet. I feel like maybe he's mad, but I noticed that, and then I can make a choice, right? So a lot of what we'll be learning here is to start to notice the way our minds react to things, the emotions that come up, the things we do automatically. Now, you can still do whatever you want. It's a free country. You know, you're not going to be told what to do. But if you're paying more attention to what you're doing, you'll probably make better choices and usually have a better outcome in that case. So the way we do that, as I'm saying, is through paying attention. And in fact, this is really a great definition all by itself, paying attention. You know, if you just pay attention, you'll see how your own mind works. You'll never have to take my word for anything in here. This is a very experiential thing for you to understand how your own mind works. Of course, I can show you the scientific research too, but it really comes down to paying attention. Because we have such a tendency, right, for our minds to be all over the place. And again, it's not always bad, but when it's so automatic, those thoughts, you know, oh, I almost forgot that I have that meeting tomorrow. I was hoping at least while I'm sitting here listening to this guy talk, I could forget about that awful meeting. So you think about that meeting, sparks the stress response, which sparks some other stresses, which sparks some other stresses. Now, it's not like you turn that off, but over time, what you find is that just doesn't hook you as much. And in fact, one of the research findings is that even after an 8-week program like this one, we can actually see certain areas of the brain get thicker in a brain scanner. If we just do a simple brain scan before and after one of these groups. In fact, one of the places is this medial prefrontal cortex right here in the middle. We can actually see that get thicker on a brain scanner now. Basically what you're doing, as I think I said earlier, is exercising these attentional channels in your brain. So your mind wanders off and you bring it back. Your mind wanders off and you bring it back. The more often you do that, the more you strengthen, just like strengthening muscles by exercising those muscles. So we can talk about that later on. Now the next part of this definition is on purpose. And this gets at the intentional quality of mindfulness. So this is what makes mindfulness different from some other forms of meditation. And by the way, maybe I should mention now too, this word meditation is a very, very broad term. It can mean almost any way of working with the mind. There are literally thousands of different kinds of meditation. Mindfulness is a very specific type of meditation that we're talking about here, which is about paying attention in this moment. So there's an on-purpose component. So again, mindfulness will never tell you what to do. It's your life. But what you can start to practice asking yourself is what I'm doing right now what I want to be doing right now? Or did I fall back into some kind of automatic pattern, right? You know, maybe some of you right now are just thinking about work, even though, you know, we've been here a half an hour or so. Maybe you've been thinking about work the whole time. Now, if I knew that, I wouldn't go up to you and say, you know, don't think about work, you got to pay attention to me. if I were to ask you a question, what I'd probably ask you is, are you thinking about work all evening here on purpose? Now, a couple of you might tell me, yeah, I really do have an important meeting tomorrow, and if I blow that, I lose my job. Okay, maybe you shouldn't even have come here tonight, but somebody dragged you here or whatever. So you're thinking about that on purpose, so that's fine. But my guess is most of you would probably tell me, yeah, I don't want to keep thinking about work. I just keep doing it out of habit, and it's causing me all this stress, or the stress is causing me to think about it, chicken and egg kind of stuff. So this practice, one of the aspects of it is to notice, what am I doing right now? Okay, in this case, thinking about work. And then I can just ask myself, is this what I want to be doing right now? And if not, I bring my attention to where I want it to be. Now, initially, it keeps going right back to the thing you don't want to think about, of course. So it's a practice. And there's a lot of other aspects to that too. But the next part of this is in the present moment. Because the only time you're ever going to do anything or feel anything or experience anything is in this present moment, right? But in our minds, we tend to always be somewhere else, right? I even know if this is appropriate to share, but somebody emailed me this great cartoon, and the first box showed a man at work, but then in the little thought bubble, it showed that he was really thinking about playing golf. And then in the next box, it showed him playing golf, but in the little thought bubble, it showed he was thinking about having sex with his partner. And then in the last box, it showed him having sex, but in the little thought bubble, he was thinking about work. Yeah, this tendency we have to always be somewhere else instead of where we are right now, right? So this practice is to keep coming back, what's happening in this moment, right? We have this tendency to think it's all for the future, right? That it's coming in the future at some point. Alan Watts talks about this trick that's played on everybody in this culture, and the trick is all the good stuff is coming in the future, right? If you work hard enough, just wait, and if you postpone your pleasures, it's all coming in the future, right? Won't that be great? I mean, when you're a little kid, hey, just wait till you get to go to kindergarten, that's going to be great, right? Oh, and you better do well in kindergarten because you want to get into first grade, and you better do well in first grade because you want to get in second grade and junior high and high school. And high school is when it counts because you want to go to college, right? So you better get into college. Oh, and then you better do well in college so you can get that job. Oh, and you better do well at your job so you can get a promotion so you can get more money. So then you can buy a house, but then you'll have to buy all the stuff to fix up that house. And now you're having kids, so you better get some more money so they can do this too. And you better take that promotion because retirement's coming, right? And it's always coming in the future, right? And assuming you even live long enough to retire with your health intact, most people want to just then play with their friends and hang out outside. I mean, so what was the point of that whole journey? So you get this realization, right? And I know, here's a spoiler alert because there's a couple young people in the room, but for the rest of us, you remember that day when you kind of woke up and realized, hey, wait a minute, I've been tricked, right? This is my life. I've been in my life all along, right? It's not coming. It's not someday. It's not down the road, but we've been tricked into doing that. And so what happens is we keep living for this future, and even when that great future arrives, we don't enjoy it because we're on to the next future because it's such a habit to always be on the next thing, right? Now, don't misunderstand me. It's important to have direction for your life. It's important to have goals, but when you make those goals more important than the moment, you're not going to be able to enjoy those goals even if you reach those, right? Or we get stuck in the past, right, with regrets. And, it's important to learn from the past, but we rob ourselves of our lives if we dwell in the past, right? So it's about balance. Now, the big joke in all of this is you really can't get out of the present moment. So you might be coming to this class to think, I'm going to be more in the moment if I come to this class, but the joke is you can't get out of it, right? Somebody get out of the moment. You're always in the moment, right? Even when you're thinking about the past and the future, you're doing it right now. The problem is we confuse those mental representations with these actual experiences, evident to the senses, right? That's what the word empirical means. Those of you that study science, the word empirical just means evident to the senses. To your senses, there's just this moment, right? You can't touch the past. If you do, you're doing it right now, right? You can't smell the future, right? It's just bringing our attention back into this. So the practical side of this is, even if you have a super busy day, if you're just in this moment, it doesn't have to feel busy, right? Because the feeling of busyness is thinking about what you're not doing right now, right? Oh, later on I've got to do this, and I got to do that, and then I got to do this, and then I got to do that. But no matter how much you've got to do, you're just doing this right now, and now you're doing this, and now you're doing this, right? So that's one way we can make this very practical. It sounds a little philosophical the way I'm talking about it. But the practical thing is, okay, what's in front of me right now? Now, maybe right now I need to triage what's most important to do next, or maybe I need to plan my schedule, but I don't have to spend all day thinking of all the stuff I'm not doing, right? If I'm just doing it one thing at a time, it's a funny thing to say, but if you're more in the moment, you can actually get more done because you're not wasting time thinking about what you're not doing. You can just be in what you're doing. And it does reduce the stress response, right? When I'm just doing this, I'm in this moment, I'm not thinking about the stuff I'm not doing. That's what sparks the stress response, right? The next part of this definition is a little confusing, and people have talked about this sort of tossing it out. Non-judgmentally. Because we're not talking about getting rid of judgment. Judgment's important, right? I mean, all of you had to make a judgment as to whether or not it was going to be worth your time to come here, right? So you need to make judgments. Is this going to be good for me? Is this going to harm somebody else, etc.? So judgments themselves aren't good or bad, but the problem is when we never turn them off, right? When they just are constant, habitual, and compulsive judgments, right? Where no matter what you're doing, you're judging what you're doing or judging what you're seeing, then you're never actually in the moment, right? If you're kissing your partner, but the whole time in your mind you're thinking, well, this kiss is all right, but I wish she kissed me more like she did yesterday or something. While you're making a judgment, you're not actually feeling the kiss as much in this moment, right? Because your mind's attention is somewhere else. Don't we all have at least one friend or maybe family member that no matter how great something is, they find something about what's going on to judge or compare it to? Well, when I did it, we did it this way. And those people are probably not that happy, right? Because they're always somewhere else in their heads and not appreciating the moments that are in front of them, right? So it's about suspending this temporarily, right? It's not getting rid of it. We want judgment, but instead of it dominating our consciousness, it's just sort of over here. We might need to act on it, but it doesn't have to filter every experience. So we'll talk more about that in the class. The last part of this is the unfolding of experience moment to moment. Now that might sound contradictory to what I said earlier about there just being this moment. But this gets at the active, dynamic quality of mindfulness. As I said, the point of this is to bring it into your life and into your relationships, right? So it's not just sitting still. Now we'll do some exercises where we sit still, kind of reduce the variables and exercise the mind, but the whole point of this is to bring it into your relationships, bring it into work, more of the moments of your day where you just start bringing more of this attention. So this can be a very active, very dynamic type of thing. So when you're having a conversation with somebody, you're not off in your mind somewhere else, and then suddenly you're like, oh crap, I didn't notice what they said. I don't know, should I ask them to repeat it? Then they'll know I'm not paying attention. That's not polite, and you get lost in your head. So one of the things we'll ask people to do in the class is just start noticing more what's happening as you're doing things in your daily life. So what is it about mindfulness? And I mean, obviously it's been around for thousands of years, as long as human beings have been around. So what is it that is catching so much research attention, and why does it seem to be so helpful for so many different things? So let me mention some of these now. We'll get into more details if you're coming to the class, but just as a brief introduction. As I was talking about, one of the things that fires the stress response is our thinking, is our worrying, right? The way our minds get carried away and spark that stress. But a very funny thing happens when we're thinking and worrying, and that is our attention goes to a mental realm. We start thinking about future what ifs or past regrets or whatever. Now, when you're doing that, you're not actually feeling the sensations in your body as much in that moment, right? Because your attention is on your thoughts, not on your body. So there's a principle called negative reinforcement in psychology. What that means is your brain is wired to want to keep doing something that reduces discomfort, right? So your brain says, whatever you're doing right now, I don't feel the stress as much. I mean, obviously we know that doesn't make the stress go away, but you don't feel it as sharply because your attention's on your thinking. So your brain basically says, wow, whatever you're doing right now, keep doing that, do a lot more of that. And so what happens is people get stuck in this cycle of thinking, worrying, right? It's very much like alcohol or other drugs. The reason drugs are so challenging to deal with, even though the person logically knows this is damaging me, this is killing my relationships, they feel this craving, urges, stress, anxiety, whatever. I don't want to feel that. So when I take a drink or a hit, it lowers it immediately almost. So their brain says, do more, and maybe it'll feel less worse, right? And so people get stuck in that cycle, right? So same with our thinking. And what's worse about the thinking is the thinking usually is about bad stuff, which sparks more stress, but I don't want to feel the stress, so I want to go back to thinking, which sparks more stress, which makes me think more, which sparks more stress, which think me, right? So one thing we can learn to do, this sounds a little backwards for most people, is move into the sensations, the message, and what happens is it tends to pass through. It's almost like the stress, the emotion was trying to give you a message, but you didn't want to hear the message, and so you kept ignoring it and with your thinking, and it just keeps kind of pounding at you, listen to me, and it sort of builds up and builds up. I've seen studies that show that a pure, raw emotion should only last about 90 seconds, including the stress response. As I said, it's only supposed to be 90 seconds to run from that tiger, and then it moves through your system, right? So if your stress, if your emotion, I'm talking about the really strong ones, we have emotions all throughout the day, of course. Those really strong ones are only supposed to last 90 seconds, so if they're still going on and on, there must be something feeding it. There must be something fueling it. So if we can get at the source of that, we can allow that to pass through. And in this case, oftentimes it's the fighting of it that sort of keeps it going, which I know sounds backwards because we're all taught to fight to make something happen. But when it comes to our emotions, the more we're battling ourselves, the more we can tend to get stuck in this cycle. An analogy I like to use is that of jumping into a cold swimming pool, right? You ever have that experience, you go to a hotel or whatever, and you go up to the pool and you dip your toe in there and it ends up being cold, right? And then you're like, well, I'll just kind of sit over here and you guys can swim, right? If you just go in the water, you're going to feel worse at first, right? You're going to feel more cold when you go in the water. Now, and it's the same with our emotions. We call that the extinction burst. It gets worse when you first move into it, and that's why people don't want to do it. That's making it worse. Why would I keep doing this? And so they go back to avoidance, right? So if you jump in the pool, feel worse, I'm just not going to go swimming, right? But if you just stay in the water, right? Your body adjusts, and then you literally don't even feel the cold after a little while, right? And you've got two options. You can dive in all at once, right? Cannonball, jump in and kind of freeze all over your body, right? And wouldn't you say it only takes about 90 seconds, right? And then your body's pretty much used to the water. And then you got those of us who like to prolong our torture through what we call systematic desensitization, right? You go over to the steps and you put your left foot in and you wait for that one to adjust, and you put your right foot in and wait for that to adjust, and you get really mad if your friends splash you while you're doing this, right? You can do it either way, right? But the point is you go in, and it feels worse, but if you can just stay with it, your body adjusts. And so the worst thing that you can do with the swimming pool or with your emotions is jump in, I don't like this, you jump back out again, and then beat yourself up, I'll try again, and it ends up being this in and out struggle all day long where we're fighting with what's really just a natural process. It's your body just giving you a message, but we make the messenger the enemy by fighting with it sometimes and get caught up in this big battle. So we can talk a whole lot more about that. Another process, and this one's a little more subtle to get, but another process we'll get at is a better understanding of how our thoughts work and how we can get caught up and lost in our thoughts, right? Here what we'll be practicing is something called decentering, and it sounds really funny when I try to put it into words, but normally it feels like you're in the center of your thoughts, right? Like, I just keep messing up, or things are never going to get better, and I just can't handle this, and it feels like you're in the thought, right? And that has a strong emotional component to it, sparks all kinds of memories and associations, right? Decentering is the recognition, oh, I'm having thoughts that I'm no good, or I can't do anything right, or things are going to get better, never going to get better, right? So instead of being the thoughts and lost in them and all the emotional turmoil, oh, that thought is back that I'm no good. Normally when I have this thought, it's a sign that I'm getting stressed out. So I'll go deal with the stress instead of arguing with myself about whether or not I'm any good. I mean, it's going to sound like I'm poking fun, I kind of am, because we all do this, but isn't it funny that we argue with ourselves all the time? I mean, who are you going to win against? I mean, you're fighting your side. And you know all the arguments you're going to give yourself. You ever get caught up in that? You know, you can't do anything right. Well, I did this one thing once. Well, that's just because somebody helped you, but I was nice enough that they helped you. No, they just wanted to feel better about themselves. I mean, you get into this argument, right? So this approach is helping us notice, oh, wow, look at that. I'm having an argument about my self-worth right now. I normally don't do that unless I'm stressed out. So I'll deal with the source of the stress, not keep arguing. I mean, you can argue with yourself if you want. Or if it's an important thing you do want to think about, of course you can, but that's much different than getting lost in the arguments and lost in the thoughts all the time, right? So that's something that takes a little bit of practice. So as you can guess, this really does need some systematic training. So you know, if you don't come to this class, there's other resources out there. I encourage you it's just like physical exercise. You really need to practice to get the benefits of doing this stuff.